Hey, I totally left the screen. That's okay. I'm getting there. Here we go. Sadly, I can't listen to it because I get a audio feedback that makes me hear it twice. But you enjoy. This is my brother's composition and performance. He's a talented musician. Oh, wrong hand symbol now. Dang you, far right, you've ruined the OK sign. But good morning to today's show, Jim Acosta. We're going to see a short clip soon of Jim Acosta describing Trump as an animatronic failed Elvis. Alan says, hello, Dav. Let It Be says hello. John says, great to see you so early. I know. Instead of hanging out late with my husband last night, we went to bed relatively early. I got the dishes done early, and means I'm more capable of broadcasting at this time. So I'll try and adopt that strategy going forwards. That's still my brother's music. Oops, playing. I can't listen. I love it, but I can't listen because through Haps I'm getting two replays of it, and feedback's atrocious. So, are you hearing it? Or did it completely go away when I switched screens? Bob's also happy to see me broadcast earlier, and Kevin says hello. Hello, Kevin. Hello, Bob. Lovely to see you both. It's a lovely reward for an earlier broadcast. All right. I'm just going to line up Jim Acosta because what can we do in response to the kind of more naked fascism on the right, the more electorate shrinking, voter suppression, outright unconscionable pursuit of power at the expense of the voting public? What can we do with that? So in the meantime, I'm getting up Jim Acosta because I think when you have a problem, the key is always to go, well, even if we can't control our enemies, what can we do to avoid contributing to the problem ourselves? And if passivity and too broad acceptance of some kind of automatic benignness with the Republican Party or with Christian fundamentalism brought us to this place, then it's important for public discourse to turn on a dime, or just not even a dime, turn on 4 years of recognizing that evangelical Christians support Trump regardless of what he does and regardless of how harmful he is for the United States. They'll continue collectively to support him, and it's not functionally useful to just sit on one's butt and complain of the hypocrisy. That's a very limiting and emotionally indulgent way to respond. So I got a slogan from someone the other day. I heard on Twitter someone say that their boss ran by the motto, don't agonize, organize. So even though this channel provides lots of platform for agonizing, hopefully it also is a focal point for organizing, at least amongst the tiny corner of audience that constitutes these listeners. Let It Be said, your brother's music is very lovely. Thank you. And Kevin says you as well, which I think means he's happy to see me too. Yes, I'm happy to see you, Kevin. Kevin, as I remember, is from Wisconsin, and family members were involved in farming, and they were hit by Trump. Oh, bear with me a second. I'm going to adjust the lighting. There we go. Fixed it. All right. Now let's listen to Jim Acosta be rude about Trump in a way that's not just indulgent indulging in the way we sometimes do, which is to call him a fascist and a failed coup leader and a domestic terrorist who conducts some terroristic activity by stochastic terrorism, which is a term not in popular use, but stochastic terrorism means you broadcast messages that you know will be interpreted by some people, potentially lone wolf actors, as a call to action, and then they will carry out the terrorist acts on your behalf that you desired to happen. So even though you have not personally lit a bomb fuse or fired a weapon, you have commandeered the hearts and minds of people who live on the edge of society and who are easily roused to violence. I mean, not that it was that easy. Trump worked on his followers for many years to get them so detached from reality that they would try and march to the Capitol to overthrow democracy and reinstall Trump for a second year in stark defiance of the results of the Democratic election. Kevin says, I remember correctly. Hooray. Okay, I might have to get off the screen so we can hear Jim Acosta. I think it's only 1 minute and 30 seconds. No, 52 seconds.
Urge of former President Trump, who really ripped the lid off of all of this ugliness in this country. Addressing a crowd at Mar-a-Lago, he's once again spreading election lies, sort of like this, the sad old Elvis act that he's been doing lately. Let's watch.
I wouldn't be surprised if they found thousands and thousands and thousands of votes. So we're going to watch that very closely. And after that, you'll watch Pennsylvania and you watch Georgia and you're going to watch Michigan and Wisconsin and you're watching New Hampshire. They found a lot of votes up in New Hampshire just now.
Yeah, John, this is like watching the Hall of Discredited Presidents at Disney World. It's just so sad. It's like he's an animatronic character now, spewing out this stuff over and over again, like he's got a string that you just pull behind him. You replace the batteries when they run. Urge of former president.
All right. So I think some of the descriptions used there were quite evocative. That he's like someone you pull a string and he just recites the same rehearsed lies. I'm glad that's on mainstream television, and I'm glad that people will have less appetite now for badgering CNN to say, how dare you be so nonpartisan? How dare you reveal that you are beholden to the left? Because Trump isn't in power, so they don't have to pretend to be giving equal credence to people in power from both political parties. He's out of power. He's weaker. His raw underbelly is exposed. But Jim Acosta did also describe Trump as ripping the lid off the ugliness in this country. And I'm going to celebrate that for a moment as well, because it means Tim Acosta isn't just attributing racism in America as being an invention of Donald Trump. Yes, he emboldened and he empowered racists. Kim is glad to see me so early as well. Yes, thank you, Kim. And Kevin his family renewed their contract with farmers on our land, so years more of farming to come. Well, that's excellent. Have I said hello to Alan? Hello, Alan, and Kim, Kevin, Christopher Lucas. Hello, Christopher. And Bob, John, I think, yeah, and let it be. Fantastic. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. I'm just looking at an article called "The Confederacy Was a Con Job on Whites and Still Is." It's interesting because we often wait for Republicans to mess things up so much in areas where they control that Republican voters will recognize that they're being abused and vote and change their vote accordingly. Whereas according to a framing of this as pseudo-populism, the more Republicans hurt their constituents by obstructing policies that would help them or obstructing the passage of policies that would help them. You hungry, darling? So you had this sandwich. Do you want some raspberries or apple? Or because we ate all the bread, but we're going out soon with Daddy. So could you save some of your appetite a little bit, darling?
I'm so hungry.
I'm so hungry. Well, that sounds like you do need some fruit. I think you should go get some fruit.
I'm 200% hungry.
You're 200% hungry. That sounds very hungry. Can your brother help you? I think he can. I think you can help each other.
Wait, no, he can't.
He can.
How much cookies am I allowed?
Because we're going out soon.
Any number more than
Okay. Oh, somebody's birthday?
out of 2. Out of 2. How many cookies out of 2? It's not 1, it's 2. 3, 4, 5, 6,
All right. So I'm going to share. Sweetie, you know Mummy's broadcasting right now. So if you stand there and count, it's going to be a little bit tricky for people to hear. All right, I'm going to share this article. You can wake Daddy up if you like. I said 1. Yeah, 200% hungry. I know. She just had a melted chocolate sandwich.
Because if I'm 200% hungry, I'll just be 100% hungry with 1 cookie.
That's a good argument. All right. You're a good arguer. All right. She is a handful in the most delightful way. She's so funny and such a powerful advocate for herself, which is good. I absolutely celebrate that. It's almost like I have to get a little platter organized for her, which is only fair. She is growing. She's a growing child, and she deserves all the food she can get her hands on. All right. So this is an argument that says most Southerners didn't own slaves, but they were persuaded to risk their life and limbs for the right of a few to get as rich as Croesus from slavery. Now, Croesus is from a Greek myth. Isn't he like a super wealthy king? Let's have a look. Croesus. All right. Last king of Lydia, there was a nation called Lydia who was renowned for his great wealth. He conquered the Greeks of mainland Ionia and was in turn subjugated by the Persians. Okay, well, that was just a quick aside. Kevin's got to get going because it's 9 a.m. See you later, Kevin. I'm glad to hear you're well. Okay, so how did plantation owners mislead so many Southern whites? For their sacrifices and their votes, they earned 2 things before and after the Civil War. First, a very skinny slice of the immense Southern pie, and the second thing that made those slim rations palatable then and now, the shallow satisfaction of knowing that black Americans had no slice at all. How did the plantation owners mislead so many Southern whites? They managed this con job partly with a propaganda technique that will be familiar to modern Americans, but hasn't received the coverage it deserves in our sesquicentennial celebrations. Starting in the 1840s, wealthy Southerners supported more than 30 regional pro-slavery magazines, many pamphlets, newspapers, and novels that falsely touted slave ownership as having benefits that would, in today's lingo, trickle down to benefit non-slave owning whites and even blacks. The flip side of the coin of this old as new trickle-down propaganda is the mistaken notion that any gain by blacks in wages, schools, or healthcare comes at the expense of the white working class. Well, that's fascinating. So, as much as I complain about Fox and OAN and Newsmax and just the very effective right-wing brainwashing network, it's not It's not novel. It's been done before. Investment in media, investment in the technology, the media technology of the time, pamphlets and magazines and books, to argue that slavery would benefit poor white people in the South. So that's extraordinary. I would love to see records of that, just to share with people, because it tells a story. It tells a story of replicating patterns of communication that are purposed to trick people, are purposed to make people comfortable with harmful policies from Republicans that funnel money to their wealthy donors, that create tax breaks for wealthy people, and so force the middle class to shoulder a disproportionately large burden, tax burden, to keep America's infrastructure afloat, including its large military spending and other things. But if corporations and wealthy people don't have to proportionately contribute to the society that allowed for their wealth in the first place, that supported the creation of wealth in the first place, then it's not just capitalism, it's vulture capitalism or feudal capitalism. Ooh, feudal capitalism. I don't know how much that resonates with some people, but feudalism is a system of having lords, the landed gentry own property, and everybody else does the work of farming and cultivating the land and using their labor to generate profit, but that profit flows primarily to the aristocracy. So we should do that more. Refer to Republicans as the party of the party of American aristocracy. That's evocative, isn't it? Is it evocative? I mean, I know Americans and Australians often love to fantasize about royalty, and they look to British culture and revere it. But that's really going back in time to seek to recreate the political and social and economic dynamics of feudalism, when you have serfs slaving away for your lord and master who own the general area that you live in. Oh, yes, and Sinclair. Thank you, Bob. It's important to include Sinclair when we're condemning irresponsible media outlets that just exist fundamentally to brainwash the public into accepting increasingly harsh degrees of servitude to corporate interests. I sound like a little communist, but I'm not. It's just that the pendulum has swung too far into the court of corporate executives, and that's thanks to Republicans getting a head start, getting some affirmative action from the Constitution, and being able to flourish despite losing the popular vote for the presidency most times, despite well, I should say with the assistance of various gerrymandered districts, and with the fundamental baked-in gerrymandering of the Senate itself, something that claims to be an important check and balance to the power of the House of Representatives. It's like, well, we've got one fair, proportionate political institution in the House of Representatives, so it's only balanced to have one unfair portion of Congress, that is the Senate, which is weighted in favor of white, rural, Christian interests. Bob is bringing up some news that a false facial recognition match sent an innocent black man to jail here in New Jersey. Yes, people have been noting that the new technology overgeneralizes with black faces and also renders or ascribes masculinity to a lot of black female faces, not white female faces, black female faces. So it encourages law enforcement to deal unjustly with people who are black in the United States, which means unequal protection from the law. I'm just going to say good morning to my husband. Morning. Hello. Do you know Bob often says hello to you, and I always resolve to pass it on, but I usually don't. So now that I see you and I'm talking to Bob and I remember, he says, say hello to Mr. Dav. So I'll do that now. Bob notes that he was finally released after a year. There you go. Sometimes we assume that technology will automatically improve things, but it has to be monitored as closely as everything else. And there were various people that have been blowing whistles for a while now about the inherent tendency of those computer algorithms to discriminate against black faces. And I don't know why that would be, except that they were possibly designed by white people. So maybe trialed on white faces more, or just have characteristics that are. No, you wanted to pick strawberries, darling, but it's too hot. My daughter wants to go and pick strawberries, which is a lovely idea, but not strictly possible. All right. All right, everyone. Let's see what else we've got. So good to push back against facial recognition technology, not to assume that facial recognition technology is just a fair, non-racist way of helping support justice, because it is it's been formulated in a way that contains an inherent tendency to discriminate. So thanks, Bob, for raising that. I'm going to talk a little bit now about vaccines, because vaccinations is one way, unfortunately, that Republicans have been spreading the consequences of their irresponsibility, and the fact that they've been inculcated to believe in rampaging individuality as opposed to responsible contribution. And it's interesting because it is a political party that's focused a lot on talking about responsibility, but turns out that doesn't strictly translate into taking responsibility for the individual role we all play within the overall cog of America's public health. Sean's here. Hello, Sean. John says picking strawberries is fun. True. But we live near the equator and it's too hot for there to be any strawberry farms in existence here. So, yes. Bob planted 75 strawberry plants this year. When we move to Boston, maybe there'll be strawberry farms there because it's colder. I don't know if that's too cold for strawberry farms, but hopefully at some point we'll get to visit. I think America's certainly on a path to greater freedom as the vaccination levels rise. And when we hit saturation point and it becomes evident that Republican holdouts are protracting the pandemic in the US, then potentially there'll be more people brainstorming ways to bring Republicans on board. So it turns out that from Republican focus groups conducted by a Republican pollster called Frank Luntz, that if you hold little talks with groups of Republicans and you present them with Zoom chats where doctors speak to them, that they feel like they've made progress towards vaccine acceptance, because they then feel like it's coming personally recommended from doctors who they can see. If you can see a face and hear a voice, and it doesn't then feel like it's coming from the government or just an imposition from the government, it's doctor recommended, then that is a strategy that can raise the rates of vaccination compliance. So while people are still a little bit locked down, that's definitely a strategy that the Democratic Party should be asking states to adopt. Maybe I'll tweet that to one of Joe Biden's advisors in the slim hope that they see that, to say, look, this is a strategy. Get local doctors, get a program to have doctors having Zoom chats with people to say, chat about your concerns about the virus. It'd be hard not to get overtaken by anti-vaxxers who might try to shout down a doctor. But they'd have to just do some vetting, I guess. Letter B says, you personally know a lot of people who are scared of the vaccine. Well, there's some positive data to share, so I'll share that, and then we'll see how we go. we can at least discuss things that could be shared with people we know who are fearful. So this is Dr. Ashish Jha. He's a professor from Brown University and an advocate for the notion that an ounce of data is worth 1,000 pounds of opinion. That's a great notion. I might just steal that as a screen grab, even though some data can be abused by people with racist agendas or sexist agendas. I remember when people used to run with an ounce of data about women being stupid because physiologically we were determined to have smaller brains than men. And it's true. If a woman is smaller than a man, in terms of brain size, yes, there might be a slight size difference, but in terms of mental capacity, that doesn't hold true very well in the general sense, because women are clearly just as capable and intelligent as men, and that's been demonstrated over and over again by the areas that women have filled when they've been allowed to access opportunity. Yes, Alan notes that anti-vaxxers are producing fraudulent vaccination cards, and these are often the people that are very savage in their denouncement of immigrants who fabricate, undocumented migrants who might fabricate documentation to be able to work and provide for their families, and who still pay taxes because their employer deducts tax to pay via an individual tax number, an ITN. Just to do my part to dispel the mythology that undocumented people don't pay tax and don't contribute to the societies in which they reside. All right, so Dr. Ashish notes, at what point should we see cases in the US begin to drop sharply from vaccinations? Complicated, but experience from Israel says 45 to 50% of the population are vaccinated, then you should see cases drop sharply. So the US overall is shy of that number, or that percentage, but some states pass that threshold. So do we have evidence that it's working in those states? Why, yes, we do, he says. And here's a thread. Let's look back at the top 5 vaccinated states: New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut. Is VT Virginia? And ME, what's ME? Is that Michigan? No, it's not going to be Michigan. Maine. Oh, Maine. Of course it's Maine. I'm learning my states. Okay. So all have greater than 50% of the population with one or more doses. And so what's happening with cases as in reference to data taken from 2 weeks ago? North Hampshire down 44%, Massachusetts down 37%, Connecticut down 40%, Virginia down 46%, and Maine down 42%. So they're all New England states, which is where I'm headed at the end of June. So just at a personal level, that's exciting. And if you look broadly at cases and vaccines, oh, dang it. I've accidentally closed something. I'll be back. Oh, VT is Vermont. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Okay. I guess you don't really need me to share the screen at the moment. Okay. Although there is one graph. There's one graph that I can bring up. Bob tries to remind people that undocumented migrants pay taxes when they purchase anything, a television, cars, candy, pet food, and so on. Yes, and advise them that such a thing exists as the ITN. So when they're getting paid, there's automatic deductions from their paychecks. So this is a graph that says looking at it by age group is another way to visualize it. Let's have a look. This is in Indiana, COVID vaccination levels and case rate trends. So the green line is proportion of the population that's partially or fully vaccinated. And again, these are divisions made via age group. And then the black line is daily new cases per 100,000 people on a 7-day average. So looking just at the bottom right corner where you've got 80 plus years and the proportion of that population that's vaccinated is close to 80%. And their case rates have fallen significantly beginning in the middle of February. Same with 70 to 79, and for 60 to 69 a little bit later. For 50 to 59, their vaccination rates have kind of leveled off a bit around 50%, or at least that, but I guess it's still heading upwards. But yes, their cases have not fallen as far as the cases amongst 80-year-olds have. And 40 to 49, cases started to rise again. So there was dips in March, and then I guess complacency and relatively low vaccination rates have caused those case numbers to rise. So that's a very clear visualization that when you don't have those high rates of vaccination, your age group is more susceptible to rises in case numbers that result from a mixture of complacency and more contagious variants spreading in your community. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense, and let me know if there's any questions. So if we take the 10 states with the largest drop in cases, the average vaccination rate is 49.8%, but the 10 states where cases are rising, the average vaccination rate is 39.9%. So it could be that 10% difference is critical in the direction of trajectory. Are you going to have a state with falling case numbers or rising case numbers? And the answer to that is, do you have a state with a vaccination rate at 39.9% or 49.9%? Beth Hoover Fitness just subscribed. Thank you, Beth. And John is saying that tracks. It makes sense to him. Oh, wow. I'm just noting in the trending section that Michael Flynn appeared to forget the words to the Pledge of Allegiance during an appearance at a Bikers for Trump rally in South Carolina. I'm not going to make a big deal of that because you know what? That's pebbles on the shore. And there's an Isaac Newton quote. About pebbles. Pebbles on the beach. He said, I do not know what I may appear to the world, but to myself I seem to have been only like a boy, playing on the seashore and diverting myself in now and then finding a smoother pebble or a prettier shell than ordinary, whilst the great ocean of truth lay all undiscovered before me. Wow, and that's a website which seems to have a whole article which is just 12 brilliant quotes from Isaac Newton. There you go, that's a little boost to the day today. John Ardmore says pebbles and bam bam. Yes. No, I'm not going to get distracted by Michael Flynn forgetting the words to the Pledge of Allegiance, because everybody has memory lapses at some point in time, particularly when they're appearing in public. But back to the esteemed doctor, he says, it appears that somewhere around 45 to 50% of the population vaccinated, which means 65% or so of adults being vaccinated, because obviously the population comprises of more people than just adults, there's also children. But then cases really start to go down when 65% of adults are vaccinated and 45 to 50% of the population altogether. He says, hardly definitive, but it appears around 50% of the population vaccinated may be the turning point. Obviously, other factors like underlying prior infection rates are also important, but nationally, slow decline in cases masking sharp drops in states with high vaccination rates. Okay, so he's saying the overall data blurs things a little bit. In states with high vaccination rates, there's a sharp drop, and states with lower vaccination rates are still experiencing a rise. So it averages out to look like cases are just slowly falling, but they're not. There's a binary outcomes at work. High vaccination states experiencing that critical turning point and a high drop in case rates. Somebody says, and it's sad, but I embrace these sad stories because they're teachable moments. He says, "Thank you, doctor. My mother died of COVID less than 3 weeks ago here in Massachusetts. She was surrounded by many COVID deniers in our family. It's been very difficult. I pleaded with her to isolate. What you're saying is so important for people to hear. These are compelling trends. Thank you." Someone says, "I'm so sorry, I'm in Massachusetts also, but compliance in my area has been good. I've never seen an unmasked person. I also don't have any COVID deniers, thank goodness. I was worried about my 78-year-old sister who has lived in the South, Oklahoma, and Texas for decades, but they all got vaxxed." And the person whose mother died said, "Yes, she contracted it from socializing with those same siblings. I know this because she hid it from me that her brother was sick at home with a confirmed case. Crickets from them at her funeral, not even a condolence. My heart hurts. My grandfather died 11 months ago as well." And I remember speaking to our audience here that Bob was very upset. It was you, Bob, wasn't it, when your younger brother died? And he was a COVID denier, and he died of the virus, leaving behind quite a large number of children, if I remember correctly. Bob has looked up a figure from New Jersey policy perspective that since 2010, undocumented workers have paid into New Jersey Social Security $1.36 billion. And of course, they don't get to withdraw from Social Security because they don't have Social Security numbers. So it's great that Joe Biden is thinking to organize a pathway to citizenship for undocumented workers because they've been paying into Social Security for so long without the ability to withdraw from it and contributing to the American economy. I understand the resistance on the right that says, hey, we have to have some integrity to our borders. We can't just reward people for evading immigration policies and procedures and making their residence here because they feel like it. So I understand that point of view. But if you haven't committed any crimes and you don't have a criminal record and you've been contributing to a society for a long time, it's okay to recognize that. And I think there's a majority support for Dreamers to be recognized as American citizens if they've earned that title, because people understand that children are certainly not responsible for the decisions of their parents in being brought to the United States. Bob says, yes, it was his brother who died with 8 children and that he was a COVID denier. And we had Brian yesterday. We spoke to Brian, who has patients still, and their families and they themselves will claim to have the flu and just reject the diagnosis of COVID because they don't believe it's serious. So it shows that America is still dealing with the aftershocks of a duplicitous president. And that's a cool word. I'm going to write down duplicitous. A duplicitous, self-serving president. And you just normally hope that when people are self-serving, the way in which that they're self-serving is that they feel good when they are commended for a good job, or that they feel good when they serve their country well. But Donald Trump felt good when he was self-serving in a way that involved tricking people into thinking he was serving the country whilst he funneled lots of taxpayer money into his own pockets. And that gets more and more exposed to Americans who follow the news, or at least the mainstream news, But there is a rival mainstream that fills the hearts and minds and ears and eyes of a good 30 to 40% of Americans. And that news is not news. That news is constructed to obscure the truth about Trump and what he did to the United States. That news is constructed to maintain support for politicians who harm their country and who serve themselves and their donors' interests and not the American people. And they act in ways that is strongly counter to the interests of wage earners in the United States. So if you're the type of person who can live off the interest that you earn from your stocks or your massive land holdings, then yes, Republican tax cut policies, the only policies that they enact when in office, everything else is obstruction, then you're well served by voting for Republicans, except that the stability of your country is undermined and the social cohesion of your country is undermined. So if you have a skerrick of patriotism and awareness, then you wouldn't vote for Republican politicians. Bob is so proud of President Biden. He's been reading how they are straightening out the unaccompanied youth situation, and they're finally being treated humanely. Yes, the numbers have fallen, I think, by 80% in the last 4 months of the numbers of unaccompanied young people held in detention facilities. So they're really bringing those procedures up to speed in defiance of people on the right who relish persecution of undocumented migrants because they've been indoctrinated with the idea that any kindness or humanity, no, just normal, humane, sensible policy decision making that benefits undocumented migrants, that is somehow at their expense, which harkens back to the old school propaganda in the South that you should go to war for the Confederacy because even if you don't own slaves, you'll somehow benefit from it. And if black people are allowed to benefit, then it's at your expense. I guess I need to go and drink some more water. But yes, so this is something I took. Look, I can see how people might have some pushback if they worry that all of America will be disdained internally as racist and that there won't be any consensus that America should be protected or revered even a little bit. We can say there's elements of America to revere, but overall, it weakens America when you have to accept someone who's falsely positive about America, like Trump and Republicans. That kind of enforced positivity. And apparently that's often something that resonates with evangelicals because the children are taught to not gossip, and that means you can't be negative about leadership. You have to be positive about America. You have to be positive about the leaders of the evangelical church, and that really devolves into a protection racket for people in power and a way to enable sexual predators who abuse children and enable predators like Trump too. If you have a culture of it's wrong to be negative and wrong to be critical, then you look askance at anybody being critical, which is possibly one reason why people on the right have developed such hostility towards the left and Democrats, and they're so suspicious of anybody who dares to criticize any element of America, because that's antithetical to evangelical culture, which says support the authority structures and revile criticism of any kind. So this comment said, yes, America is inherently racist. That doesn't mean every white person is Archie Bunker. It means America is run by a series of systems that reward whiteness and penalize blackness. These systems exist in almost every major aspect of American life. Well, that would be very contrary to the perspectives of people on the right, who are often united by their acceptance of a statement that says Black people are not the target of racism in America. Racism towards Black people no longer exists in the United States, but racism towards white people exists. And those people fervently believe that, and that rift with reality is very consequential. 500,000 people have died. 600,000 people have probably died at this point from COVID. And it's part of that reluctance to look at facts and that stubborn adherence to being positive about grifters and con artists like Donald Trump and Republican politicians. Joy Ann Reid replied to that comment about racism. Oh, also, can anybody tell me about Archie Bunker, because I'm not familiar with who he is? Joy Ann Reid wrote, "You can't build a country on the premise that Black people are just property. The Indigenous are not person enough to have any right to remain on their own land, and immigrant personhood is a wait and see. Immigrant personhood is on a wait and see basis, and not have it be architecturally racist." Well, that's a new phrase, architecturally racist. There's some elements of design in the US that affirm racism or affirm disadvantage. Maybe that affirm and perpetuate disadvantage. Racially constructed disadvantage. Racially constructed disadvantage. And it's not to say that there aren't poor white people in the US who are disadvantaged, because oppression of poor people is often a big deal, that there are various systems in place that punish you for not having enough money in the bank. There are fees that you get for having a low bank balance, that renting things is expensive but is necessary for people who don't earn enough of a wage to be able to save to purchase big ticket items. So Sean Nesbitt is explaining to me that that Archie Bunker is a character from a TV show called All in the Family. Thank you. And Kimchi likes my title of LRP for Trump, for the last Republican president, because I want them to remember that they're responsible, and I want people to remember that the Republican Party is responsible for enabling and elevating Trump. Sean used to work at Liberty University, which is a Christian university, isn't it? An evangelical Christian university. When he worked there, they had a policy of telling on others. If you didn't, and it was found out you knew someone who broke a rule, you were punished worse for not telling. Wow, you were punished worse than the person who broke the rule. So you were deemed to be an accomplice to the crime, and the punishment for being an accomplice was worse than for actually committing a crime. Interesting, very interesting. So you can't gossip. I think that's just a differentiation, because you can't complain about authority, but you have to tell on your peers. So I think that differentiation reinforces what I said about how the don't gossip culture is constructed to support the power structure. So they clearly differentiate. It's gossiping if you talk about people in authority, but it's criminal if you don't disclose that you know a peer who's committed an infraction of the rules. Where Bob lives, it's a wealthy area. You're 6 miles from the Trump golf course. You were talking to a person who was talking about undocumented people. I asked him, who does he think works on his lawn and landscaping? It stopped him in his tracks. That's so great that you have these stories about how you've made people think, Bob. Somebody should do a documentary about you and how you are a one-man crew of challenging others, because a lot of Americans won't challenge other people when they endorse racist, anti-immigrant viewpoints. But you do. You were a bold man, and I love it. And you are showing that it can make a difference, that at least you've instigated a thought process in that man, even if he's able to go away and just watch Fox News again and go, oh no, wait, I've rebalanced it. I remember again, I have to hate immigrants, otherwise everything collapses. Tucker Carlson told me so. Bob still, he lit a candle in the dark. Joanne noted that if you construct that country to ensure that in perpetuity the only people you deemed from the start to have full personhood, namely white Christian men and secondarily white Christian women, you would always remain on top. Well, what do you call that? I guess she's hinting that you call that a racist country. No one acknowledges that rather obvious truth that racism is built into the architecture of the United States, has claimed that America is irredeemably racist. The sole claim is the architecture needs to be updated. And she says, I mean, look at all the constitutional amendments. How many are there? 24? And someone says they didn't call it Reconstruction for no reason. Just because it failed doesn't mean it wasn't on the right track. And someone else notes that Reconstruction didn't fail. It was bargained away in the election of 1876. We are still living with that legacy. Yes, this is true. There was an election. It was contentious. Republicans pretended to not accept the results. There's fraud, very similar to what happened with Trump. And then to resolve that, there was a bargain made to say, okay, we'll withdraw federal troops from Confederate states, which just then was a free-for-all pass for Confederate states to commence lynching black voters and lynching and attacking black elected politicians, so that all the civil rights that had been won through the Civil War were undone, and all of the strides that black Americans had made were rolled back, not rolled back all the way to resume chattel slavery, but rolled back significantly to take voting rights away. Bob says some people would say he was a pain in the butt. All right, folks, I'm going to go hang out with my family now. It's been lovely to talk to you. Thanks for being part of the broadcast today. Thanks for getting excited that I broadcasted a reasonable hour on this occasion. I'll try and repeat that positive step forward. And thank you all so much. I'll say goodbye to whoever I can see. Sean, Bob, Let It Be, John, Beth, Peter Parker, Christopher Lucas, Alan. Hi, Alan. Anyone else? Kim, Kevin was here. Kimchi, Molly. Hey, everyone. Nice to see you all. And I think that's everybody for today. Excellent. All right, cheers. All the best. Christopher says, take care. Thanks, Christopher. And Bob gave me an Appreciate Award. Thanks, Bob. Take care, everybody. All the best.